The decision is to stay. The threat of going it alone, the uncertainty that would follow, and the promise of greater autonomy presumably all helped to convince Scottish voters to reject separating from Great Britain. Does this mean the Scottish secession movement is dead? And what does a vote to stay in the UK tell the province of Quebec? Here's Richard Gwyn, author of a 2-volume biography set on the greatest Scotsman in Canadian history. That'd be Sir John A. Macdonald.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Great to see you again, Richard. Thanks for coming in today. Well, what'd you think of the results when you heard them?
I was a bit surprised because I didn't understand that so many Scots were lying.
And were lying?
Lying, essentially. They had decided some time back to vote no, but didn't want it out to get out because they felt, and very legitimately, they were likely to be called traitor or something like that. And this is, the referendums are very painful. It may not be just your neighbor or your co-worker who called you a traitor. It may be a friend and it may be a family member. And so they're very brutal things, and you don't do them idly.
As we remember twice in Canada, they can be very, very emotionally
They
tough.
are very, very, almost as much emotion as you're going to get, on that issue. So that I accept that those people had a perfect right to hide the fact that they had made up their minds.
So you're not exactly being facetious here, because it was really 50-50, the pollsters were telling us right up until the last minute, and it ended up being a 10-point split, which is not that close. So you think people were fudging what they were telling pollsters?
No, I think they were lying. I think outright lying.
Were, eh?
But I mean, I'm not saying a terrible lie. It's a human lie. It's just to keep the peace.
There were places within Scotland, Glasgow, Dundee, that actually did vote yes. How do you account for that?
Well, I don't know the local situations, but obviously there were people. Anybody in the business community was all hostile. The financial community was all hostile, and people who were connected closely to England, I mean, soldiers and so on, would have voted no. But the Glasgow's had gone through some hard times, some hard economic times, and the great Glasgow industries, the shipbuilding and so on, all vanished for practical purposes. So they got something to say. The other thing, of course, was youth. And Alex Salmond, who's a very, very smart politician, came out with the idea that he was going to force Britain to pull out its nuclear deterrent, its submarines. Well, it meant that the youth were all for him. And he's very cunning. And also, Salmond, lowered the age limit to 16. So he handled it cleverly. But by the way, that was a very good referendum. I mean, there wasn't much nastiness. The question was simply, should Scotland become independent, was clean and obvious to everybody, unlike the Quebec one, which was all manufactured to try and squeeze out a few more people who would support it and so on. And the debates were very good, many of them, so that I think the Scots should be very proud of what they did.
In fact, the no side wasn't no with a fist in the air. The expression was no thanks. He was polite.
And no thanks is the Canadian word. The phrase which was used, because no is a harsh word to be campaigning on. So no thanks, which is kind of a nice pleasantry, was skillfully phrased.
You had to be impressed, I think, with Salmond in the morning after speeches, where he very much was evocative of René Lévesque saying, the people have spoken. Now let's not be nasty about it. We lost, but life goes on. He gets props for that, I guess, doesn't he?
He does get props, and he's built up some credit for the future. I mean, there's not going to be another referendum shortly. There's no question of that. It didn't come close enough. It may happen. Don't discount it. But so that Salmond, I think, deserves a great deal of credit for his skill and for of what I just said a moment ago, the caliber, the quality, the decency, the basic decency of the debate, which went on for 2 years. Very remarkable. There was no real nastiness for so long a strain.
Now his life will be different, of course, going forward, because he's stepped down from his position. But for everybody else in Scotland, does life basically just go back to the way it was?
No, I don't think it does. I think in a way both sides won, both sides lost as well. I mean, England has been told that the Scots don't like them, and that's not nice for anybody. England has admitted that it has to give more in the way of devolution of some jurisdiction, devolution of tax powers to Scotland. It's going to make Scotland more independent, and so on than it is now. Scotland, of course, or at least the separatist Scotland, lost. They lost their big hope, and it's going to be hard to recreate that spirit. But it is a fact that both sides have won, and so it's not going to. And so some of the things that's going to follow on now are going to be very interesting. For instance, on the devolution, I mean, England is not like us. England is a very centralized country, and quite minor things in some municipality will be decided in London in the Parliament. It's quite ludicrous. And so they're going to go into devolution, but they're not a confederation in the way we are. And who do you devolve to? I mean, it's one thing to devolve to Scotland, but there's going to be pressure coming from the cities, Manchester, Liverpool, Bristol, etc. Why should they? Why should the English get nothing? It's going to be quite a demanding time for England, for the English political system.
Never mind Wales, never mind Northern Ireland.
Those two are absolutely the same.
They will want powers too.
But they are little. Well, Scotland is only little. You know, we are pretty little because you think of Ontario and PEI, but we've been at it for so long. We've figured out how to make things work and how to pretend that 10 totally unequal provinces are actually all equal.
It's always a danger to put our own experience too much in the forefront of this, but we can't help it. We went through this twice with our own referenda. And back in 1980, Pierre Trudeau made many of the same promises that Prime Minister Cameron was making this time. We will devolve powers, we'll give you, more muscles to do what you want. Trudeau promised it and never made good on it. Is there a danger of Cameron doing the same thing here?
Well, first of all, you're not right, I would argue with you. Trudeau did give a lot. We always think of him as a fanatic centralist. He handed over power of immigration to Quebec. That's a huge thing.
He repatriated the Constitution without Quebec's signature.
No,
Richard.
I know that, but you go on from that and try to find others to say, and they're not come to him. He actually did. He gave a lot of money over to Quebec too. No. Quebec doesn't recognize it and doesn't want to admit it, but it's had a very Quebec in many ways is not sovereignty association, which was the miracle that people wanted at one time, but it's what I would call autonomy association. Mm-hmm. It's very independent of Canada in most respects, and it takes money from Ottawa to spend it on Medicare, whatever it is, and spends it on roads or tax cuts, and pays no attention. I mean, and there's nothing Ottawa can do.
That's because of Mulroney, not Trudeau, though. But that's another
But it's
story.
never happened. But it was happening even under Trudeau. I'm not trying to defend Trudeau on this. The big thing was the symbolic one, the question of the Constitution. You're quite right on that. I think Cameron has no choice, and he will do it. He has to do it.
He very skillfully said something to Scottish voters in the last few days, which was, I know you don't like me, but I'm not going to be Prime Minister forever. And I know you don't like my Conservative Party, but it's not going to be the government forever. But if you vote yes, that's forever. How influential do you think that was?
It's a bloody good line. It's a very good line. We can't test it because we don't have polls before and after and all the rest of it. But that's the kind of thing that he and others should have been saying for a long time before, which was, showing respect to the Scots and really trying to talk reality rather than trying to frighten them with, then they're going to lose their money, wouldn't be a part of the Sterling bloc and all that kind of thing. So he deserved it. He's deserved what's happened, and he's lucky not to have it been close enough that his own position might be in jeopardy. His own position from the Conservatives. I mean, if it had been 48-52, where the virtual certainty of another referendum and so on, he would have failed so badly, let alone, of course, if he lost. And he's escaped. But he really has to come clean on this devolution stuff. You
can give us a better sense of this given your ties, your personal ties to Britain, but can you imagine being the Prime Minister at number 10 Downing Street after this 300-year relationship comes to an end? I mean, his place in history would have been ignominious forever, wouldn't it? I mean, that would have been
he was a goner. If they'd lost it, he was a goner. And the same would have applied with Jean Chrétien. He would have been a goner in 95 when it was only, whatever it was, 50,000 votes, which is nothing between the two. And these are big things. And, there is a plus side. I'm not trying to be Pollyannish, but the turnout was over 85%, around 85%. The registration, which is what they do, you have to register before you can vote, was 97%. It's never been anything like that. So it's brought a whole lot of people into politics who in one way or another will continue, whichever side they're on.
Again, with comparisons to the Quebec situation, we got the definite sense in 1995 that people wanted to vote yes to whatever that question was. It was hardly a clear
Terrible.
question.
Yeah.
Because it was an easy way to smack the elites in the face. Was that at play here?
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that holds true much more widely than just Scotland or Quebec back then, and Quebec really wasn't the issue so much there. There is, as we all know, a tremendous backlash against politics, against politicians, against civil servants, against anybody in almost any authority. A doubting of them, a cynicism about them, and so on. And undoubtedly that was people unconsciously, indeed, in Scotland, took advantage to do exactly what you said. Slap the elite, slap the big guys, the people who think they know everything, and so on. And that, of course, is a phenomenon that is just about worldwide. It's happening happening right across Europe, in almost every country except Germany, which is in very good shape. And so it just happened in Sweden a few days ago. You know, Sweden is a very successful, very sedate, admirable country, and its incumbent government has been, virtually pushed out, and a far right-wing anti-immigrant thing has just emerged and won, I think it's 45 seats. So there's a real, and one phenomenon is that we are all much more individualistic than we used to be. We're more concerned with ourselves and our family rather than the country, the province, the city, and so on. We're kind of a selfie culture.
Again, for Quebec here. The sovereigntist, separatist, call it what you want, movement in Quebec is about as low right now as it's been in, 40, 50 years. What do they take, if anything, from the results last night?
Well, they're going to win. Even the Scots, the separatists, they will get devolution of one kind or another.
I mean in Quebec.
Oh, I'm sorry. Quebec, well, I think our separation problem is over for a generation. I've got no idea what will happen beyond that, and I won't be here to tell you, or to guess at you.
You never know. But when you say a generation, you mean 20 years?
Yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, you go back to what I said much, much earlier. There is a lot of pain. People take these issues and they feel them very strongly, almost more than almost anything else, some kind of, and so that to put people through the ringer of that pain again, where they may find themselves breaking up with their spouse, having a row that is unresolvable with a sibling, that kind of thing. You can't lightly put people through that. This one, because it was so intelligent and clean and all the rest of it, provided dignity to it. But many of these things are very unpleasant.
But we have to point out the Canadian experience was they had a referendum in 1980, which was really decisive. I mean, it was 60-40.
For us, good guys.
For the no side. Yeah. But you know what? And I remember people at the time saying, well, that settles that. 15 years later, we're back at it. So can you really say in the Scottish example, a 10-point margin of difference settles it for 20 years?
It doesn't. 10 points is a lot less than 20 points, Things happen. And so you can never say, it's foolish. I mean, when I say a generation, that was foolish. But that's the probability. Because, it is expensive as well. And it's not going to do Quebec any good. It's in economic trouble. So it's Ontario, but much more so is Quebec, to take risks on this kind, as well as the pain that you give people. So you don't do it idly. But things happen in life, and stuff happens.
Stuff happens is the polite way of saying what we know you really want to say. Gotcha.
Things happen is what I want to say.
Events, dear boy, events, right? Let's finish up on this. You know that in Spain, they would like, in a couple of months' time, or at least one province would like, Catalonia, would like to do the exact same thing. It is the suggestion is it is an unhappy part of Spain right now, and it would like to leave as well. What do the results of last night portend for a Spanish referendum?
Well, it would have encouraged them if the separatists in Scotland had won, but it doesn't end it. And what they're proposing is, because the Constitution doesn't allow for a national referendum except by decree of the central government, that they're trying to get, a purely regional, in Catalonia, referendum, which would not be official, would have no, but if they win it, gives them a chance, it gives them a lever.
So we're still not sure that referendum's going to happen.
No. They're none certain. But Veneto is agitating for a
I
referendum.
saw that, yes.
Yeah.
Venice, there are people who want Venice to separate from Italy.
Yes, I know. Well, you see, all of northern Italy hates southern Italy because southern Italy sucks out a lot of money out of the rest of Italy. And so you've got Lombardy with Milan, and you've got South Tyrol, which is up in the north, brushing up against Austria. And Veneto, I was amazed. I mean, you think of Veneto, they're all going around paddling, you know. But they're quite, it's quite strong. But sometimes, of course, these demands for a referendum can be a few guys in a pub.
Well, as I think it was in a pub not too far from here, because you know there's a separatist movement in the capital city of the province of Ontario, where some people want Toronto to separate from Ontario.
Well, you see, that it goes back to an issue that which I wanted to throw in. I mean, England is really already two countries. One is called London, and the other is the rest of England, or rest of Britain, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I mean, London is radically different, incomparably richer, et cetera, multicultural, and so on. And that is true in Ontario in a sense. Ontario consists of Toronto and the rest of Ontario. And you know, Toronto now extends about 50 miles all around, except across the Lake Ontario. But things are changing in our side. And one reason is globalization. Who do you belong to in a globalized state when decisions that affect you directly are made on the other side of the Atlantic, Pacific, wherever?
I'm delighted to say for the last 17 minutes you've belonged to us. So thank you for coming in tonight and helping us out with this. Richard Gwyn at the Toronto Star.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.